Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is our esteemed co-host, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Republican chair of Suffolk County Republican Party, as well as a vice chair of the state Republican Party. And in the studio with us is my good friend, Eric Levine, one of the great New York lawyers, a great essayist, a political commentator, and a host of major national and international figures, from ambassadors, former State Department officials, members of Congress, Senate, governors. And the three of us have been together a number of times, and people just love having Eric on. So once again, Jesse and I have drafted him.
Glad to be drafted.
Okay, and it's a big drag for us because I have to look across the street where his office is, and we wink at each other through the window. So let's begin at the beginning. Let's talk about the speakership election. Now, I have my take, which I'm about to share with you in the audience. I'm very happy that Kevin McCarthy was elected Speaker. I think he's the right man at the right time. I think he's a real leader. He's a national figure. He helped put together the House majority. He won seats in the 2020 cycle. He won seats in the 2022 cycles. But for Kevin McCarthy's work, you would not have a majority of Republicans. Unfortunately, because of the civil war that went on within the Republican Party, the majority was far from being the great sweep that the Republicans anticipated, either for the House or Senate. But you would not have leadership control of that body, the House of Representatives, without Kevin McCarthy. Now, the question becomes, what did Kevin McCarthy have to do to get that speakership win? Did he so harm himself that it's going to be difficult for him to maintain strong leadership when you need strong leadership in the House of Representatives against a runaway left-wing Democratic majority? Is it going to hurt the Republican brand as they go forward to next year's off-year election, the 2020 or this year's 2023 cycle for local elections and governorships? Is it going to hurt even more significantly when the House and Senate and the presidency are up in 2024? So, Eric, what's your take on that?
So a lot of Republicans like to point to the fact that Nancy Pelosi had a similar majority in the House in the last Congress and became the Speaker with a similar 216 votes. And yet she was able to hold all Democrats together and pass a radical progressive agenda, some very large pieces of legislation, most of which were bad for the country, but she was able to get them onto President Biden's desk. How was she able to do that? And Kevin McCarthy may or may not be able to do that. Well, the answer is quite simple. She made sure that all power in the House rested in the speakership. She was able to dictate all committee assignments. But most importantly, people were scared witless of her. They knew that if they crossed Nancy Pelosi, she would cut them off at the knees and their political careers, and she was more than happy to do that if it was necessary. With Kevin McCarthy, in order to get to his 216, he had to make all kinds of concessions, particularly to the Gates Six. You have Gates, you have Boebert, you have Biggs, Rosenblum, Crane. These six holdouts, which really humiliated and embarrassed McCarthy and forced him to make all kinds of concessions. Now, some of the rule package that was recently passed, which was the majority of the concessions they were seeking, many of them made sense. Rather than having these huge, humongous 1,000-page bills, you break them up into smaller pieces. You appropriate for each individual piece of legislation, rather than having 14 all in one, appropriation bills in one big omnibus bill, you have 14 separate appropriation bills. That makes sense. Normal, ordinary order, and the country can debate each and every one of those appropriations. But there are many rules. There are a few rules that were adopted which are going to be quite problematic. The two that leap to mind is that now one person can vote to vacate the chair. What does that mean? You're going to have one person has the ability to have a no confidence vote in the speaker. And we can go through this all again. So every time that Matt Gaetz or Lauren Boebert or Biggs don't like if they don't get their way, they can hold the House and McCarthy hostage again by holding another vote. Now, the country watched as Kevin McCarthy was belittled and humiliated and forced into more and more concessions. And the country's going to watch. Can the Republicans govern themselves? Never mind, can they govern the country? It's really important if the Republicans hope to expand their majority in the House, take back the Senate, and win the White House, they have to convince the American people that they can govern. And there's going to be a piece of legislation that's going to come up, the budget, which is going to be very problematic. Because for the House Freedom Caucus, and Jim Jordan made this point very clear on Sharon Breen this past Sunday, that in their minds, defense spending is in the crosshairs for being cut. This is something you would expect from the progressives on the left. The thing that supposedly one of the characteristics that distinguishes the House, that distinguishes Republicans from Democrats, is Republicans believe in a strong, robust national defense, along with the Reagan policy of peace through strength. Now, the Freedom Caucus has made clear, this was Jim Jordan's point, that we need to cut back on spending. In theory, wonderful, great. I think we're all for that. Debts and deficits are out of control, and they have to get under control. But they're talking about bringing discretionary spending back to the 2020 levels. And in order to do that, they've made it clear that defense spending, as long with other discretionary spending, are on par. They're both subject to being cut. And now you're going to have roughly the 200 who originally voted for Kevin McCarthy, who are for national defense, are going to be put in the position of either having to cut defense spending or not have a budget. And that's going to be a really ugly debate because most of us in the Republican Party, who are Reagan Republicans, particularly in the area of national defense, believe that we have to be building up our military. At a time when China is building up its military at unprecedented rates, it's aligning itself with Russia and Iran, and there's a new axis of evil out there that's threatening the American-led world order. The American military needs to be rebuilt, not cut back. So it's going to put the Republicans in a very difficult position, and that fight is going to play out very publicly. And I'm very concerned that that's going to further undermine the Republicans' ability to project to the country that we can govern, because Kevin McCarthy has given away so much of his power in the House.
Jesse, your take.
Number one, I agree in part with Eric. And number one, I really, it was messy. It's something that no one wants to ever see, but we got through it. What I want to shine a light on is, more importantly, from my perspective, being the vice chair of the state committee downstate, and as a Republican chair here in New York, is that not only was it Republicans from New York that provided this majority, as slim as it may be, but it was also those Republicans from New York that galvanized between votes 14 and 15 for speakership to prevent the House from recessing until Monday and forcing the next vote. In fact, it was the three from Long Island, D'Esposito from Nassau County, Garbarino, which is the dean of the delegation in the second term from the second district, and Nick LaLota from the first district, that truly moved forward to make sure that that motion to recess failed, and that led Kevin McCarthy to successfully win on the 15th ballot somewhere around 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. As the rules package, I think Eric pointed out a number of the issues. It's my understanding the rules package said that it wasn't a cap at 2022 levels, not 2020 levels, but I could be wrong on that. The rules package does say some things that you would think are important for us. A 72-hour waiting period. I don't know I bet none of us on this show have ever complained that I'm sorry, strike that. We all criticized Pelosi in the infamous comment regarding Obamacare that we'll know what's in the bill after we pass the bill. a 72-hour waiting period on these bills, and as Eric pointed out, ending these omnibus resolutions is a good thing. Making sure that we have investigations on the weaponization of the Department of Justice, the FBI, the border, going to the border and having these hearings on the president's business dealings, not just Hunter Biden, the personal situations. It's more about the president's business dealings that may have compromised him abroad. Term limits, and now the motion to vacate. Now, I'm not as smart as Eric and yourself, Your Honor, but it's been my understanding that the ability for the motion to vacate, any one person could have done this, was in place long before now. In fact, it was changed under Pelosi as she consolidated support for her own speakership, as Eric said, and she used it as a weapon. So it's going back to where it used to be. But also, what I think is important is that the fight for the speakership was more based, I believe, on personalities. And we discussed this last week, even with Congressman Lota, than it was on policy, because all those 222 Republicans, and probably quietly some Democrats, agree on the majority of the Republican Commitment to America platform. They agree on the policies and such and to move forward. So I think that, it was messy. It was, I think that it actually, while maybe you could use the word embarrassing, I use the word that it demonstrated the strength and fortitude of Kevin McCarthy, because it's my understanding, and I think, and Nick Lotus shared this with us, that it was McCarthy who pounded on the podium and said, I'm not going anywhere. And he stood there. Now, remember, it was 2015 when he was set to be the speaker that he set himself aside for a number of reasons, and it cleared the way for a different speaker. So I think it demonstrated the strength and the ability for Kevin McCarthy to lead this caucus. As it comes to the budget, listen, I tell you, I'm a conservative Republican, and we have families, businesses that are dealing with issues with inflation, and they're dealing with their own budgets. No one can tell me that the government can't reduce its spending. Every level of government can reduce its spending and still achieve its goals. And including in the Department of Justice, I think there have been stories after stories. Why not look into the Department of Justice? I mean, maybe we can save money in the Department of Defense. I apologize to speak to Eric's issue. The Department of Defense, where instead of putting these woke programs in, take the monies that we're using in that woke programs and eliminate that. I don't believe the Republicans in their quest for a balanced budget or to curb our spending is to reduce the number of bullets or bombs or ships that we have. It's more in taking it away from these programs that have shifted more to the left and into this realm of wokeism and such. And let's not forget, I think Eric pointed it out, the Pelosi dealt with her own faction inside her caucus. But what did she do? And Eric said it. She passed and she counted and she put forward onto the desk of the president these far-left socialist programs. So who was the faction of the people in her group that she had to worry about? It was the far-left socialist Democrats, the AOCs of the world, the Squad of the world. So they got what they wanted. So that's where I see it right now.
All right. We're going to take a break because Kevin has given us the sign. I want to follow up on this because there's one other rule that I found very problematic. And former Congressman Peter King of Long Island, who's one of the leading members of the House and a true giant of the House, commented on it. We had a discussion on it last week on Cats at Night, and I want to bring that to everybody's attention. We'll be right back. This is the Long Island Report with Chairman Jesse Garcia, Republican Party, and esteemed lawyer and political analyst Eric Levine. We will be right back.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense. talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, esteemed lawyer and political analyst and commentator Eric Levine, and I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. At the break, we were talking about some of the rules changes. Now, let me tell you my position about the rules changes. I think a lot of those rules changes were actually very good rules changes, and I didn't have a problem with it. I do have a problem with one person making a motion to vacate the chair, because I think that can jam up the process. The other one was something that was raised last week on the Cats Night Show with John Catsimatidis, where Congressman King co-hosted with us, and he brought up the control of the Rules Committee and the ability to bring matters to the floor and be consistently have motions to amend, and how that can jam up the process. And I know they gave up at least 3 and maybe 4 seats on the Rules Committee to the far-right Freedom Caucus, and that could be problematic in the Rules Committee. The reason the Rules Committee is so important is it sets the rules of the game for doing legislative consideration on the floor of the House of Representatives. It says what issues will come up, how much time will be allocated, what the process is for amending. And if Peter King, Congressman King, is correct, this is dangerous because it's going to be abused and misused and cause a problem about jamming up the process. And I agree with both my co-hosts that the issue is, above everything else, can the Republicans show the country that they can govern? Because if they cannot take the opportunity, and this is a very important opportunity, to show the country that they have a countervailing voice, they have a check and balance against the extreme left of the Democratic Party, then all is really lost for this country. Because you have a runaway left wing controlling the Democratic Party. They control the Senate. They control the White House. They need to be able to show they have to govern responsibly to win that credibility. And they're setting the message out there and the record out there for what happens in 2024. What say you, Eric?
Yeah, so I would agree with that. I want to just take issue with a couple of things that Jesse said, though. The first, on the cutting back on the woke programs as it relates to the military, those aren't really expenses at all. That's cultural. That's just things you teach in classes. These are just a couple of hours here and there. That's not any meaningful sum of money. We are at our lowest level of naval ships since going back almost to the First World War. We have planes that were cannibalizing other planes so that we can get as many in the air as possible. We did not meet our goals in terms of enlistment. We need to R&D is way behind. It's not a matter of maintaining our military. We need to be ramping up our military. If you think that we're spending a lot of money on the military now, just wait and see how much money we're going to have to spend if China invades Taiwan, or if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, or Iran succeeds in the Middle East. The idea is to prevent these things from happening. And the only way you prevent these things from happening is having an overwhelming military that nobody wants to challenge. That's the least expensive way to keep peace in the world. Make sure there is no war. To Richard's point about the Rules Committee, that's 100% correct. And this ties into something that Jesse was saying before. Nancy Pelosi, she gave in completely to the radical left wing of her party to advance a progressive agenda. Do the Republicans want to be seen as being unified behind the right wing of the Republican Party, behind Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert? Do we want them to be setting the agenda? That's exactly the point. We want these people marginalized. We don't want these people at the center of our party. We want the center at the center of our party. And that's how we win. We need the Mike Gallaghers, the Mike Gaetz, the Mike Waltzes of the world. These are the folks that we need to be putting out there. These should be the faces of the Republican Party. So if what you're telling me, Jesse, is that the way we get unity is to completely cave, capitulate, and surrender to the extreme right wing of our party, which exists, I'm not with you. I want to be in the center. This country is a center-right country. We win the House, we win the Senate, we win the White House if we govern from the center right. We lose if we govern from the extreme right.
Jesse.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying, but let's go through this. We all saw and have been around Kevin McCarthy during the campaign trail. What did he speak about? He spoke about true investigations and subpoenas into the weaponization of the Department of Justice, into the weaponization of the FBI, into the IRS, and as it went into different specific groups, whether it be like the Tea Party groups and so on and so forth. He spoke about going investigating and taking a look into big tech. Those are things that we were talking about in these rules. We're talking about investigating the failures of the Biden administration as it pertains to the border and that impact there. Those what Kevin McCarthy was campaigning about, term limits and such, are in these rules. Now, I can't speak to the amendment rule that Judge Weinberg just spoke to it, but I think that we can see that when when the Defense Department is told that they need to do something, it needs to get done. A perfect example is submarines. It's my understanding, and please, as I said, I'm just pulling this out from a memory from when I served in the House of Representatives. We know the cost of two companies building their submarines and the huge cost of it. The federal government forced them. I believe it was actually a Republican administration that forced the two competing companies to come up with the Seawolf submarine that saved money for the Defense Department. It allowed us to build more submarines of a new higher class in technology and also provide superiority in that type of warfare. So those are the type of savings I'm speaking to. I was using woke as an example, but I will tell you anything that is spent in government, especially the federal government, whether it's cultural or otherwise in the classroom and down to the servicemen and women, it's going to cost a lot of money. And there is a way that we can reapportion money to make sure that our defenses in terms of ammunition and warfare status can be put into place and better invested in. But we can't say that every dollar invested in the Defense Department is invested properly. That's just pie in the sky.
No, you're always going to have waste. There's no question, particularly with a bureaucracy as large as that. I mean, Tom Cotton in his recent book, Only the Strong, makes reference to how Ronald Reagan determined what our military budget should be. Now, keep in mind, standing up an army is one of the few, if not the only thing the Constitution says the House must do. You can, obviously it has rules for how you pass legislation and appropriate and raise taxes. But in terms of a policy, in terms of something it must do, standing up an army is one of the few things the Constitution provides. So spending on the military is completely different from other discretionary spending, and it should be treated separately. And the Reagan approach was, and which Cotton endorses and I endorse, is you figure out what are the threats America faces today, and what do we need to combat those threats? How do we keep the peace? How do we secure the American people? And after you make that assessment as to what do we need, then you add it all up and you say, that's what we appropriate for defense. That's how much we need. Then you turn and say, okay, how much money do we have left over for this other discretionary spending? Discretionary being the operative word. It's within your discretion. The Constitution doesn't say you must pass the Inflation Reduction Act so you can increase inflation. It doesn't say, please invite illegal aliens to the United States so that we have no border and we have to give them all kinds of handouts. It doesn't say we must give students from middle class and upper middle class homes passes on their student loan debt. It says you got to raise the military. So if we're going to cut things, and we must cut spending, we must reduce debts and deficits, it's that other discretionary spending that has to be under the microscope. Obviously, I agree 100% that there's, we have to minimize waste. There's always going to be some waste. But it is clear that there are threats facing the United States today, and our military is simply not prepared to deal with them.
Well, that's well said. I think the three of us agree a lot more than we disagree. I want to change the focus for a minute because I watched Biden go to the border, so-called, and go to El Paso, so-called. They cleaned up El Paso so it looked like Disneyland or Disney World. He didn't see anything of the real border. He did a drop in a general area. He's no more responsible for taking care of the border than Harris, his vice president, was. Nobody's taking care of the border. There's now a resolution in the in the House to have hearings for the impeachment of Mayorkas, who's the Homeland Security Secretary. They're going to blame Mayorkas for not enforcing the border, but he's been carrying out the Biden administration policies. Believe me, he's not a runaway doing this on his own. He's telling the world what the White House is telling him to say. He's gotten there. He's testified numerous times that the border is secure. That's a total laughable joke if it wasn't so sad. It's one of the most dangerous things we have in this country. The failure of this administration to protect and defend this border is absolutely outrageous. And our friend, Andy McCarthy, the former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, who prosecuted the terrorist cases at the Trade Center, who's a commentator for the New York Post and National Review, has been on Cats Tonight, and he's made very clear, and he's written articles about this, that this rises, in his opinion, to a level that the President of the United States, the incumbent President of the United States, should be impeached for failing to abide by his oath of office, which is to protect and defend our country and to enforce the laws. And I think this is very, very serious, and I think there should be hearings on this. I am calling for the Congress to hold hearings, not just on Mayorkas, but on the president himself. Now, whether or not it can vote out articles of impeachment and whether or not the Senate would vote to convict are different discussions, but we need to shed light on the absolute failure of this administration to protect this country. You've had some 5 to 6 million people running away into our cities and our states. Every town is a border town. It's not just Texas's problem, New Mexico's problem, or California or Arizona. It's everybody's problem. This country is not safe. The gangs control the border with Texas. China's waged a war against us, acts of war by shipping in fentanyl and working with the cartels. Terrorists are coming in. People on the watch list have been caught, so how many weren't caught? They catch and release people all over, all the time. And Biden, just yesterday, when he was dealing with the president of Mexico and the prime minister of Canada, said he is still sticking to his border policy. That is dead wrong. It's dead wrong for America. It's dead wrong for the future of our country. And this is a serious threat. Kevin's given me the sign. We'll pick up on this discussion when we come back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia and Eric Levine. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
All right, this is the Long Island Report. We're back with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, and leading New York lawyer and political commentator Eric Levine. When we left off at the break, I was talking about the failure of the Biden administration to enforce the immigration laws and have an orderly and a legal system for immigration that were being overrun at the border. Eric, what say you?
So I think this tells us, Biden's performance in Mexico tells us that he's running for re-election in 2024. He needs his left-wing base, his progressive base, and they believe in open borders. The sad thing is that we all know that open borders means no country. No borders, no country. But that is really what the left, the progressive left, wants to achieve. They want to weaken our military. They want to eliminate the border. They want to challenge anything that challenges centralized control, centralized government, so they attack schools, they attack families, they attack religion, they attack individual liberty, they attack entrepreneurship. But the border is probably the most prominent because everybody could see it. It's right out there for everyone to see. And it's important for Joe Biden to hold this progressive left. And it's important to the left that that they work to destroy America. They need the issue also to be able to accuse Republicans of being xenophobes, homophobes, Islamophobes, any kind of phobe, hate. That's just the mantra they throw out there. So they need the open border. They can just wrap themselves around the poor immigrant, the poor asylum seeker, whether or not they're entitled to be here. They just want to put their arms around them. We should keep in mind that when Barack Obama was first elected in 2009, he had a supermajority in the House and the Senate. He could have passed any piece of legislation he wanted. He could have put forward any immigration reform bill that he wanted, but he did nothing. He didn't even propose a bill, not a single bill. Why? Because he wanted to have the issue of immigration. If you go back a few years before that, if we all remember the Gang of Six who tried to do comprehensive immigration reform during the Bush years, Barack Obama, while he was a senator, worked assiduously to use the filibuster, that remnant of Jim Crow, as he now calls it, to kill any sort of immigration reform. So Joe Biden is just, this is Obama's third administration, hoping to have his fourth administration, extending the idea that we will have open borders and undermining the sovereignty of the United States. And Biden is doing it, simply at this point because he's running for re-election and wants to stave off any sort of challenge from the left.
Jesse.
I agree with both you two gentlemen. What happened earlier this week at the border was a travesty. And you can see it because Biden is being criticized by foes and allies alike. That photo op was sanitized. I mean, it's been on record in multiple news outlets and accounts that they went in and cleaned up all of these migrant communities and such that would stretch for blocks and blocks and blocks and, would be limited. It's unbelievable. I think that actually our U.S. senators did a better job at addressing the problem, pointing out the problem, than actually our president did. Because Eric is right. This is the beginning of Biden's, campaign for a second term. We had a bipartisan contingency of senators from the border states that visited different parts of the southern border in their own states. Down there, Cronin and Sonoma from Arizona and Leavenworth. But what I found was even more interesting was Senator Blackburn. Senator Blackburn from Tennessee. She led an all-female contingent of senators to the border, and they didn't just go through in one place that was sanitized. They followed these border patrol officers at night, and they took these senators to where we see where drug trafficking was coming through. The cartel, you can see the cartel in their highly armored mechanisms and trucks and vehicles, highly armored and highly weaponized. We were in fatigues. It's a paramilitary operation right now going on there. But what's also the even more sad part of this is they went to locations where sex trafficking and human trafficking was going on. That's where Biden should have been. Biden should have been there to truly see firsthand the problems that are facing America as a result of his policies. And I, for one, I don't like to jump to conclusions, but just based on the arrogance and the lack of his pompous attitude and the lack of activity or even any action to defend this border in this country, Mayorkas should be impeached. I mean, I think that's one of the things that this Congress should do, must do. When he gets convicted, let those senators reconcile that with their constituencies in their states as they come up in 2024. But it's sad that after 2 years too late, all we got was a photo op, and it's a continuation of the same problem over and over again. Well, I did give credit to that bipartisan group of senators for doing what the president should have been doing.
Yeah, but it's even more complicated, gentlemen, than that. Let me point out to you two recent developments. Number one, there's now a war going on between the cartel, or at least one of the cartels, and the Mexican government. And the question is, who's going to win that war? You're going to have a runaway state that's run by the cartels, or you're going to have a legitimate country run by democratic elected leaders. And then the other issue, of course, is, and this is a dirty little secret about the Mexican government, how much of these people are paid off? How many of them are corrupt? Are they really fighting over the spoils of what's going on there, or they really want to have a legitimate, honest government that protects the people of Mexico and fulfills its international responsibilities to keep illegals from running through into our country? Because that's their responsibility. And Trump did a good job of the Remain in Mexico policy, and the first thing that Biden did is repudiate it. And that's why we have this problem. He said, come on down, come on in, no more Remain in Mexico. They then instituted the catch and release program with some limitations with respect to Title 42 on health issues. But the fact of the matter is the President of the United States has the responsibility under the Constitution to enforce the immigration laws on the border, and he has statutory power to suspend any immigration laws and to keep people out from coming into this country. Now, there's another issue on that. There's now been recent reportage, particularly from the New York Post, because that's one of the few places in National Review we can get some honest reporting these days, about the linkage to the Biden family to all kinds of deals and attempted deals with the oligarchs and the politically connected in Mexico. So I commend to our listeners' attention, let's take a real hard look. We now know that the Biden family has had relationships in Russia, China, Ukraine, other Eastern European countries, and now add into this mix Mexico, which leads me to the next issue, which I want you gentlemen to talk about. And I'm talking about, we just found a trove of documents that Biden, as Vice President of the United States, commandeered for himself and were hidden away and were released only recently. And the Attorney General of the United States knew about this, and they stayed silent about it for a long, long time, and now it's coming out. So the real question about this, and this is an issue I raised with both Andy McCarthy on Cats at Night as well as John Solomon on Cats at Night, is, okay, they've now turned over some documents, but they won't tell you what's in those documents. And I want to know, for one, what are in the documents that are now being held by the National Archives? Does it have to do with Ukraine? Does it have to do with Russia? Does it have to do with China? Does it have to do with Mexico? Does it have to do with any other deal that the Biden family enterprise is involved with? And I think the House should subpoena those documents, should direct the archives to turn them over. And if the archives want to play games, because they're controlled by the administration, they want to play games on this, and they certainly had no problem jamming up Donald Trump, and I'm no apologist for Donald Trump, but they had no problem jamming up Donald Trump. We should get to the source of this. And if they can't do it, and they won't do it, then I say Judicial Watch should be filing a lawsuit on this too. I want to see what's in those documents. What say you, Eric?
Well, the first thing is the same rules have to apply to everybody. There always seems to be, when it comes to Republicans and Democrats, there's one set of rules for Republicans, another set of rules for Democrats. And like you, Richard, I am no fan of Donald Trump. However, there always seems to be a special rule for Donald Trump, and this is another example. I mean, remember that we found on Hillary Clinton's laptop, we found all kinds of secret documents that should never have been there. Now with Joe Biden, we find in his archives, we find secret documents. And the idea that Garland and the DOJ knew about this before the election and did not disclose it, that just raises the specter that this is just truly political. There's just too much in common between what's going on with Hillary and Biden on the one hand and Trump on the other hand, that to be able to say, okay, you can indict Donald Trump, but you can't indict Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden. I don't think anybody should be walking out with classified documents. Yes, everybody has to comply with the law, but the same rule has to apply to everyone. And I think if we applied the same rule to everyone, we'd have a lot better results, and a lot of people would have a lot more respect for Washington.
All right, Jesse, we're going to take a break now, and then when we come back, you're going to lead off for us, Jesse. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, and distinguished lawyer and political commentator Eric Levine. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by the Disney Plus Hulu Max bundle, with plans starting at just $16.99 a month. Stream the latest seasons of The Last of Us on Max, Andor on Disney Plus, and the final season of The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. All of these and more streaming soon. Terms apply. Visit Disney Plus Hulu Max Bundle.com for more details.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, and distinguished political commentator and attorney Eric Levine. Jesse, there are a number of issues we want to talk about in this final segment. Any further comments about the border, the Biden family games, or the documents, and then lead into whatever else you want to discuss with us?
I just think that I support and I agree with what you gentlemen said. You know, we have the same rules for everyone. And it's true. It seems that there's always a certain rules for Democrats, and then there's a certain rules for Republicans, and now there's a third rule for Donald Trump. And I just think that one of the things that's become clearly honest is that the National Archives and this federal government does not know how to keep account of its records and its top secret documents. And I think that is somewhere where we need to make some improvement so we don't have this issue. But I will say this, you know, certainly you can see how, and it just goes to that belief that there's politics continuously going on in the Department of Justice, in the FBI, when you have a Hillary situation that does not get addressed properly with a raid and with constant, threats of indictments and such. You have this situation with President Biden, and you have the one with Trump. But let's not forget, number one, President Trump was the only one that could actually declassify the documents. Biden, as vice president, couldn't, and neither a secretary of state could Hillary Clinton. But the other thing is, I would imagine, at least in the Biden situation and the Trump situation, that lawyers were involved in both cases. The Trump lawyers were negotiating with the National Archives. In this case, I guess it was brought to the attention by the Biden lawyers, but they were treated differently. And that's why this country, in part, is so split, because the powers like Democrats have this need to weaponize government against their enemies, and that's where the faith in our constitutional institutions, such as the FBI, the Department of Justice, is coming into question, and that's something that we need to address as a country and as elected officials in both chambers.
Jesse, and the next issue I want to get your comments on, and I see you issued a press release on this supporting Joe Cairo, who's the county chair of Nassau County, where Congressman Santos was elected from in Nassau County out on Long Island. What are your views on this? Share them with our listeners, please.
Well, for those, on Thursday, Chairman Cairo and the National Republican Committee in Mass called upon Congressman Santos to resign. His was a campaign of deceit. It was a campaign of lies and fabrications, and he's under investigation for his campaign finance. As a partner, as a Republican here in Long Island with Joe Cairo, I have fully supported that call for a resignation, and then I joined in calling for that resignation. In fact, shortly thereafter, our state chairman, Nick Langworthy, who's also a member of Congress now, issued a statement calling on Congressman Santos to resign. This is a situation where we've had an individual that continuously given an opportunity. Listen, America is all about second chances, but George Santos has taken a stance that he's going to double down on lies. And I understand he's not going to resign because he needs that position for whatever he's going to be facing right now. But it's a disservice to the people of Suffolk County. It's a disservice to his colleagues, and it's a disservice to America to have a member of Congress that is a complete and utter liar and fraud. And there are still questions as to whether or not how he properly got there in terms of his finances and such.
Jesse,
it's a classic.
Jesse, let me clarify for me. You just said Suffolk County. Isn't he a Nassau County congressman?
He is a Nassau County.
Does he have a piece of Suffolk?
He does not have a piece of Suffolk. In 2020, he ran, he was recommended for nomination by the Queens Republican Committee in 2020. He ran a decent race, lost as a result of absentee ballots. He was in 2022. We remember when the first district lines came out. This district waged all the way up to Westchester.
It was a 5-county district.
Body of water.
Wasn't it a
5-county district? Right. No one wanted to run, and he was recommended by Queens County to the rest of the counties and such. Petitions were circulated in his behalf. That district changed. It went from a +30 Biden to a competitive district, and he was successful. But regardless of that, when we go through nominations and screenings and interviews at the local committee, I can speak for myself, and Joe Cairo articulated this earlier this week. We know the people that we're interviewing. We know them either through recommendation, they work in other public offices, they run for public offices, they've been vetted and such. And in this case, the full mass of lies and deceit would have been difficult for anyone to pick up. In fact, it was difficult for anyone to pick up because Bob Zimmerman, who was the candidate against him and in the PR, an individual, he focused his businesses and industries in public relations. The Democrat committee did not articulate any of these problems in Santos's history. The mainstream media did not do any of their investigative work to identify this. This is something, it's an anomaly, but one that we need to make sure does not happen again, whether it's here on Long Island or any other community again, because the people who are truly at a disservice here are the residents of the 3rd Congressional District. And that's why George Santos and his acts of fraud, lies, and deceit should come to an end. He should do the respectful thing at the very end. He should do the respectful thing and resign.
All right, let me point out one thing that I want to talk to Eric for his comments. The one thing I'll bring to our audience's attention is under the rules, 2/3 of the members can vote to expel. So we should not forget that. You need 2/3 votes can. It's different than making a decision whether to seat somebody or not. But 2/3 can vote for expel for in essence what we would call conduct unbecoming a member of the House. Eric.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that for that purpose, you don't need the threshold is not even an indictment. I think it's a conviction of some sort. But Eric will probably you and Eric will probably know that better than I.
Yeah. So I think we all agree that what George Santos did was disgusting. He deserves our contempt. He does, it's beyond the pale. But here we come back to the same rules should apply to everybody. The question is, George Santos tells a lot of lies, but how many? What's the critical mass? 4 lies, 5 lies, 7 lies, 11 lies, a lie about your ethnicity, a lie about your job. I mean, who makes the determination as to how execrable a particular lie is or how many we need?
Are there any Democrats, by the way, and I say this is a House Democrat, any Democrats guilty of lying?
Well, I was just going to say, I'm waiting for the Democrats to start jumping up and down and demanding that Elizabeth Warren resign.
What did she lie about?
This is a woman who lied on job applications, both for become a lawyer and for law jobs and to become a professor at Harvard, about the fact that she was a Native American. She was no Native American. Trump eventually embarrassed her into taking a DNA test, and it turned out she is 1,024th Native American. You have to go back 10 or 12 generations. But this is a woman who built a completely false resume. And then when she ran for Senate, lied about the fact that she was a Native American. And then when she first started running for president, she lied about being a Native American. And basically she held herself out as, this is who I am. This is central to who I am. Vote for me because I am a Native American. That's why you should support me.
What about the senator from Connecticut?
Well, you have Dick Blumenthal. He ran on the fact that, claiming that he was a Vietnam War hero, and that he had gone to Vietnam and served and saw battle. He never went to Vietnam. He got 5 deferments, and after his last deferment, he made sure that he was part of the Marine Reserves, which guaranteed that he would never see any action. And the only thing that anyone can point to that he ever did as a Marine Reserve, that he ran a Toys for Tot program. That was the most...
That's commendable.
Yeah, well, it was very nice. I'm sure it was great that everybody got an Etch-a-Sketch. But that may make you a community organizer, but it doesn't make you a war hero. So I guess my point is I have no problem with asking George Santos to resign. But I'm waiting for the same people to be asking for Elizabeth Warren to resign, for Dick Blumenthal to resign, and Joe Biden. This is a guy who can't walk from one side of the Oval Office to another without making up a story. I mean, remember when he ran for president the first time? He plagiarized. He took complete portions of Neil Kinnock's speeches. Now, Neil Kinnock was a Labor Party MP that was running for prime minister. He took complete portions of his speeches and presented them as his own. I mean, this is a guy who was saying this guy's life, Neil Kinnock's life, is really my life. I mean, what bigger lie can you tell about that?
Doesn't the lefties call that cultural appropriation?
I would think you would. I mean, also, Joe Biden, when he was running for president this time, told the great story about how Golda Meir called him into his office to act as a special liaison during the Six-Day War between Israel and Egypt.
Well, wasn't he qualified to do that?
Well, the problem was he was a third-year law student at the time, and a borderline law student at the time. Golda Meir was not the prime minister. Levi Eshkol was, and why anyone would think that Israel, who was facing an existential threat from the biggest military in the region, Egypt, is going to call upon Joe Biden, a third-year law student, to extricate itself from a war is insane. Of course, it's a lie.
Wasn't he busy graduating at the top of his class from law school? Was that another one of his stories?
I think that was another one of his stories. But, I mean, the point is, what's the critical mass? So I'm generally of the belief, unless you want everyone to resign, everyone who's lied like this to resign, and again, I don't know what the number of lies is, I think you leave it to the voters. The voters are smart enough to figure it out. But let's also keep one practical reality in mind. George Santos will not resign for the simple reason that he needs the seat as leverage in the event he's ever indicted to be able to say Absolutely. To the Department of Justice, okay, guys, go easy on me and I'll resign. He needs it as something to give away. So as a practical matter, he's never resigning.
Let me give you another practical, and then Kevin's giving me the sign. Another practical, and this is a problem, and I admit it as a problem to begin with, but Kevin McCarthy has the slimmest of slimmest majorities. The Republicans need that House seat, and if it goes into a special election, I'm not asking you predictions from Chairman Garcia, but it'd be very, very troubling to see what happens in a special election for that seat out on Long Island in an off year. So the practical matter is Kevin McCarthy needs that seat. The practical issue is Santos needs something to trade. And the practical matter is that we're about to get the hook from Kevin George, our esteemed producer, who says our time is up. So on behalf of Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, my very good friend and co-host, and our visiting guest and co-host, Eric Levine, distinguished lawyer and political commentator, we're signing off for the Long Island Report. We hope your family stays safe and well, and we'll be back to you next week. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Richard.